Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We dig into a pile of sources, sort through the info, and basically pull out the key stuff just for you.
Yep, the goal is getting you up to speed quickly, but with enough context and interesting bits to make it all stick.
Exactly. And today, we're diving deep into David Goggins. He's become this almost mythical figure known for his super intense approach to life.
Right, this philosophy of just pushing through self-imposed limits with extreme discipline and, frankly, a lot of suffering.
We've got summaries of his book, Can't Hurt Me. We've looked at interviews, including that big one with Joe Rogan, other pieces exploring his ideas.
And our mission here is really to unpack his core ideas, understand how he went from where he started to Goggins, and pull out the insights on mindset and resilience that might actually, mean something for you.
Okay, let's get into it. Because to really understand Goggins, you absolutely have to look at where he came from. And it was rough, really rough.
Yeah, the sources lay out a pretty harrowing picture. A really difficult childhood, marked by serious abuse from his father, both towards him and his mother.
There's that detail about being dragged down the stairs.
By his hair, yeah, at 6 years old, yeah.
Just imagine being 6 and experiencing that level of violence, that fear.
That's
It's foundational in a terrible way.
absolutely. And it left scars, deep ones. Plus, on top of that, he had these learning disabilities that just weren't diagnosed. So school, it was a nightmare for him.
Because nobody knew why he was struggling.
Right. And he talks about having to cheat, basically cheating his way through school from 4th grade all the way through junior year of high school.
Wow. So trauma at home, this constant academic struggle, feeling like you have to kind of fake it to make it.
Exactly. And layer on top of that, just pervasive racism.
Right. Especially after they moved to Brazil, Indiana.
Yeah, small town. He was one of very few black kids there. And this was a place where, the sources mentioned, the KKK actually marched in a parade in the early 90s.
That's chilling.
Yeah, and he found racist stuff written on his schoolwork. His car got spray painted with slurs. I mean, it was constant.
So fear and prejudice coming at him from all sides. Home, school, the community.
Yeah.
It's just relentless.
It definitely built up layers of insecurity, pain, And when he finally got out on his own, things didn't magically get better. No, he describes himself in his early 20s as, seriously overweight. He hit almost 300 pounds, 297, up from like 175.
That's a huge change.
Huge. And he felt, in his own words, complacent, lazy, stuck, doing jobs like spraying for cockroaches for Ecolab, night shift.
So this guy who becomes the icon of endurance.
Yeah.
He started from a place of feeling pretty defeated physically and mentally.
Totally. A really low point.
So what flipped the switch? What was the moment that kicked off this massive transformation?
It sounds almost random, but the sources point to one specific thing. Late one night, he's watching TV.
Okay.
And he stumbles onto this Discovery Channel documentary about Navy SEAL training, specifically about Hell Week, Class 224, I think it was.
Huh? A documentary about SEALs. That was it.
That was the spark. He's watching these guys go through absolute hell, pushing limits that seem impossible, and he also saw guys quitting.
Right.
And watching that just forced him to look inside. His own fears, his own insecurities. Especially, he mentions, his intense fear of water.
Which is kind of a big deal if you want to be a SEAL.
A huge deal. And right then, watching that show, weighing almost 300 pounds, terrified of water, he decides, I'm going to be a Navy SEAL.
That's quite a leap. From spraying roaches to aiming for maybe the most elite military unit there is.
A massive leap. And yeah, the path wasn't exactly smooth sailing. He tried to join the Navy, but kept getting rejected.
Why?
He couldn't pass the entrance exam, the ASVAB hacked. He scored like a 20, then an 18. You needed a 50.
Oof. Given that history of cheating in school,
Yeah.
failing that must have hit hard, like no shortcuts now.
Exactly. A real wake-up call about where he was academically. He actually had to get intensive tutoring, like 4 hours a month for 6 months straight, just to finally pass it on his 3rd try.
Okay, so he gets past the academic hurdle, but then there's the physical.
Oh, yeah, the massive hurdle. They basically told him, okay, you passed the test. Now you need to lose 106 pounds.
106 pounds.
In under 3 months. Or you can't even start training.
Wait, under 3 months? That sounds medically questionable, like borderline impossible.
Pretty much. And this is really where you see the seeds of his whole philosophy starting to sprout. He realized the only way he could possibly do this was through just brutal self-discipline and a total mental overhaul.
Which brings us to this idea he talks about all the time, a callousing your mind.
Exactly. Callousing your mind. It's probably his most central concept.
Okay, break that down. What does he actually mean by callousing your mind?
He uses a physical analogy, which makes sense. Think about lifting weights, right? Or doing hard physical labor.
Your hands get torn up at first, blisters, pain.
Right. But if you keep doing it, what happens?
You get calluses, tough skin. It stops hurting or hurts less. You can handle more.
Precisely. Goggins argues you can do the exact same thing with your mind. By deliberately, intentionally exposing yourself to mental discomfort, physical pain, challenges, failure, you build up mental toughness. You develop mental calluses.
So it's not just about gritting your teeth when bad stuff happens. It's about actively seeking out the hard stuff to get stronger for later.
That's the core of it. Consciously stepping into the discomfort zone.
Yeah.
Over and over again. One source we looked at tried to explain the brain chemistry behind it. Sort of a bro science take on dopamine, maybe?
Huh. Okay, let's hear the bro science version. Dopamine. How does that fit in?
So the idea presented is this. Easy pleasure gives you a quick dopamine spike. You know, scrolling social media, junk food, video games, porn, whatever. Quick hit.
Sure.
Feels good for a minute, right? But if you're constantly chasing those easy spikes, your baseline level of what feels good actually goes up. So normal, everyday stuff starts feeling blah, boring, less enjoyable. The source called it pain follows pleasure. You need bigger hits to feel anything.
Okay, I can see that. You get desensitized to normal pleasure.
Exactly. Now, flip it. Things that are hard, things that cause discomfort initially, like a really tough workout, or forcing yourself to study something difficult, or having a conversation you dread.
Yeah, stuff you want to avoid.
Right, that stuff feels bad during. But pushing through it, accomplishing it, that leads to a more lasting, deeper sense of satisfaction and resilience after. Pleasure follows pain in this model.
Okay.
So callousing your mind, in this view, is about intentionally choosing the path where pleasure follows pain. You embrace the suck now, you lower your pleasure baseline maybe, but you build that long-term mental toughness and get a more profound sense of accomplishment. That's Goggins' whole strategy.
Okay, that makes sense. And it connects directly to another huge Goggins concept, the 40% rule.
Oh yeah, the 40% rule. This is another cornerstone. He basically developed this through all his insane physical and mental tests.
So what is it, the 40% rule?
He strongly believes that when your mind is screaming at you that you're done, you're completely exhausted, you've hit your absolute limit, you're actually only at about 40% of your real capacity.
Only 40%. That feels way off. When I feel done, like 100% done.
I know, right? But he argues that's your brain's survival mechanism kicking in way too early. It's trying to protect you, conserve energy, stop you long before you actually hurt yourself. It puts this, governor on your effort.
Like in a car engine, limiting the speed.
Exactly. Your brain has a governor, and that feeling of, I absolutely cannot take another step, or I can't think about this problem anymore, or I have to quit this workout, that's just the governor kicking in at 40%. It's not your true limit.
So anytime we feel like giving up on something hard, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, that feeling is probably just the 40% wall.
That's his argument. And the real skill, the thing he mastered and advocates for, is learning to recognize that feeling for what it is, just a signal, not a hard stop, and then learning to push past it.
Into the other 60%.
Into that untapped 60%. That's where he says you find out what you're really capable of. And every time you push past that 40% wall, you actually expand your total capacity. You get mentally tougher, more resilient.
Okay, so armed with these ideas callousing the mind, the 40% rule, Goggins, really launched himself into this path of just extreme suffering and eventually extreme accomplishment.
Yeah, it wasn't just like, oh, I'll try harder. It became an obsession. He talks about that night spraying cockroaches, having a really bad shift, and just quitting on the spot.
Just walked out.
Yep. And decided right then he was going to become the most obsessed person on the planet Earth. He realized the old David Goggins couldn't do what needed to be done. He had to, quote, invent a guy that didn't exist.
Created a new identity, basically.
Totally. And that's the mindset he used to tackle that 106-pound weight loss.
In under 3 months. Still blows my mind.
Right. Just sheer obsessive discipline. And then came the SEAL training itself. He gets through the weight loss, gets in, and ends up going through Hell Week. Not once.
Not twice.
But 3 times in a single year.
Yeah.
Something he's pretty sure no one else has ever done.
3 hell weeks, that's why. Most guys barely survive 1 attempt.
Well, the first time. He quit.
Ah.
Yeah. He actually lied, used the excuse of having sickle cell trait to get medically dropped. But the real reason, he admits, was that deep-seated fear of water.
The thing he saw in the documentary that started it all.
Came right back to bite him. And it was compounded by the fact that he has negative buoyancy, apparently more common in African Americans due to bone density making swimming even harder.
So his biggest fear literally sank him in his first attempt.
Pretty much. But here's the Goggins part. That failure, that act of quitting because of fear, it became the ultimate fuel. It absolutely ate at him.
So he had to go back.
He had to go back. He had to confront that weakness directly. He basically had to, in his words, live in the water to overcome the terror. He went back, passed Hell Week, then had to do it a third time because of some injury and administrative timing stuff.
That whole experience, quitting out of fear, then facing it head on, then doing it again and again. It's like a perfect storm of the 40% rule and callousing the mind.
Absolutely. It's maybe the defining example. Pushing through failure, pushing through fear repeatedly. It forges something incredibly strong.
And it shows what he means later about tripling down on your weaknesses.
Exactly. Don't just manage your weakness. Attack it relentlessly. So after his SEAL career, he eventually gets into ultra running, again, almost by accident.
How so?
He wanted to raise money for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation after some friends died. So what does Goggins do? He Googles 10 hardest races in the world.
Of course he does, like you do.
Standard procedure for him, apparently. And this leads him to this race called the San Diego One Day. It's a 24-hour race on a 1-mile track.
Running in circles for 24 hours? Ugh.
Yeah. And he shows up, this big, muscular ex-SEAL guy, looks totally out of place among these wiry ultra runners, and he's completely unprepared. His support crew, a blue lawn chair, his fuel.
Let me guess. Not high-tech energy gels.
Ritz crackers and some Myoplex shakes. That was it.
Ritz crackers for a 100-mile race.
Yeah.
That's not going to cut it.
No kidding. It was a total disaster waiting to happen. And it did. He hits the wall hard around mile 70, completely falls apart, dizzy, lightheaded, can barely stand. His crew literally had to carry him to the bathroom at one point.
Just physically shutting down?
Totally shutting down. He talks about the gruesome details, pissing blood, literally crapping himself, the bones in his feet breaking, just absolute physical devastation.
Van, most people would be calling for an ambulance at that point, or long before.
Right. Anyone rational would quit. But somewhere around mile 81, something snapped, or rather, connected. He describes this moment where his mind, body, and spirit just disconnected from the pain, and he made a conscious, cold decision. I will die on this track before I quit.
Whoa.
And he kept going. He finished 101 miles in just under 19 hours, broken feet, internal bleeding, everything.
That's just inhuman. And then
the truly insane part. This race, it was only 2 weeks before he was already scheduled to run the Las Vegas Marathon.
No. 2 weeks. After destroying himself like that.
2 weeks. He said his feet were so messed up from the 100-miler, he literally couldn't walk properly at first. But he showed up and ran the marathon anyway.
How do you even?
Pure willpower. And he didn't just finish it, he qualified for the Boston Marathon, ran it in 3 hours and 8 minutes.
After running 101 miles 2 weeks earlier on broken feet.
Yeah. And he talks about the mindset shift. After going through 101 miles of that hell, suddenly 26.2 miles seemed manageable. His quote was something like, "What the fuck is 26 miles to me now?"
That perfectly illustrates the 40% rule again. Endure something truly extreme, and your entire perception of hard gets recalibrated.
Exactly. Your baseline for suffering just gets jacked way up. And yeah, he kept going, did other insane races like the Hurt 100 in Hawaii brutal climbs, ran 205 miles nonstop once.
Kept finding harder things.
Always. And then there's the pull-up world record.
Right, the 4,000 plus pull-ups.
30 pull-ups in 17 hours. And that wasn't his first attempt either. He failed multiple times before finally breaking it. Tore his forearm muscle on one attempt, got a massive third-degree burn on his hand from the bar friction on another.
Just the sheer volume.
Insane. He said he did something like 67,000 pull-ups in 9 months just training for it. Total obsession.
Okay, obviously pushing your body that hard, that consistently.
Yeah.
It has to take a toll.
Yeah.
What were the long-term physical consequences mentioned in the sources?
Oh, yeah, the bill definitely came due. The sources list a whole catalog of issues he's dealt with because of the extreme stress. Stress fractures, chronic shin splints, severe foot pronation issues. He had to tape his feet extensively for years just to function.
Taping his feet just to walk around?
Yeah. And tight psoas muscles, the hip flexors, so incredibly tight that they were actually pulling on his spine and caused a noticeable bump on the back of his head from the compression.
A bump on his head from tight muscles.
Yeah.
Wow, that shows how interconnected the body is and how extreme the imbalance was.
It really does. But maybe the most shocking physical issue was the discovery, years into his intense career, that he had a major heart defect.
A heart defect?
Yeah.
While doing all this?
Yeah. An atrial septum defect, or ASD, basically a hole between the upper chambers of his heart. And somehow it had gone completely undetected through all his military physicals, everything.
How is that even possible? How did he survive SEAL training ultramarathons with a hole in his heart?
Doctors were baffled too. He ended up needing 2 separate heart surgeries to repair it, using these helix patches delivered through arteries.
That's terrifying. Major heart surgery.
Absolutely. But his mindset, still pure Goggins. He apparently went for a ruck run the morning of his second heart surgery.
You're kidding.
Nope, because he knew he'd be laid up recovering afterwards, so he had to get one last session in. It's just next level defiance of physical limits.
It's almost hard to process that level of drive.
It really is. But interestingly, amidst all this focus on pushing through pain, he did eventually come to appreciate the other side of the coin, recovery and flexibility.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He seems like the kind of guy who dismissed stretching.
He did, initially. He thought stretching and yoga were kind of soft. But later, after dealing with so many injuries and alignment problems from chronic tightness, he actually credited consistent stretching and yoga with, essentially, healing his body. He even quoted someone describing yoga as a martial art you do against yourself.
That actually fits his philosophy perfectly.
Right. And he also became a big believer in saunas for recovery, talking about heat shock proteins and their benefits.
So even the ultimate hard man had to learn that you need balance. You need to repair the machine if you want to keep pushing it.
Seems that way. You can callous the mind, but the body still needs maintenance.
Okay, this really brings us back full circle to the mind. Because Goggins says again and again, the mind is the ultimate weapon. It's where the real battle is fought.
Absolutely. He makes the point that, when life really hits the fan, you face a huge failure, depression, loss, death. You are totally alone with your own thoughts, your own brain.
You can't Google the answer to that stuff.
Exactly. You can't outsource that internal fight. So you have to learn to control your brain. Otherwise, it will absolutely control you.
And his path to gaining that control is
facing the hard stuff. Especially, he says, by tripling down on your weaknesses. Don't just accept you're bad at something or scared of something. Attack it, make it a strength, or at least neutralize it as a weakness.
like him going back to the water after quitting SEAL training because of it.
The perfect example. That's where you truly find out who you are, not in your comfort zone, but in the struggle against your own limitations and fears.
And he talks about the cookie jar too, right?
Yeah, the cookie jar. It's a mental technique. Basically, it's a place in your mind where you store all your past victories, all the times you suffered and pushed through, all the obstacles you overcame.
Okay.
So when you're in the middle of a new challenge and that voice in your head is screaming, "Quit! You can't do this!"
Yeah.
You mentally reach into that cookie jar. You pull out a cookie, a memory of a past success, proof that you have overcome hard things before.
It's like reminding yourself of your own track record of resilience.
Exactly. It fuels you. It reminds you what you're capable of based on past evidence. And he makes a really important distinction between this kind of deep internal drive or obsession and just fleeting motivation.
What's the difference, according to him?
Motivation is fickle. It depends on how you feel. I feel motivated today, so I'll work out. But what about tomorrow when you don't feel motivated? True drive, true obsession, he says, comes from a deeper place. It's when life is imploded, everything's gone wrong, and you still get after it. That's the engine, not feelings.
Drive persists when motivation fades.
That's the idea. And he seems incredibly committed to authenticity in this. He rails against posers online, people just saying motivational things without having lived the struggle.
Right. He emphasizes that when he talks about suffering, he's actually reliving it. It's not just words.
Yeah, that authenticity comes directly from the struggle itself. And he argues that peace doesn't come first. You don't find peace and then tackle hard things. You find peace after you've gone through the suffering, taken accountability, faced the struggle head on.
Peace is earned, basically. It's the byproduct of the fight.
Precisely. He uses this analogy of the warrior in a group. There might be fighters, there might be targets, but the warrior's the one who's always ready, always showing up, always pushing, even when everyone else is comfortable or just doing the minimum.
And he actively fights against becoming civilized was the word used.
Yeah, he sees comfort as dangerous when life gets too easy. The full fridge, money in the bank, security, it can make you soft, it can dull that fighting edge.
So he keeps seeking out hardness.
Actively.
Yeah.
That's why he keeps doing these insane physical challenges even now. It's why, as an elite Navy SEAL, he volunteered for Army Ranger School, something incredibly difficult that he didn't have to do.
Just to make things harder, to stay sharp.
Exactly. To be, as he puts it, uncommon amongst uncommon people, constantly raising his own bar, refusing to get complacent.
It all seems to boil down to this radical self-discipline and total self-accountability.
100%. No excuses. He has that famous line, "Fuck that shit, man." Basically saying you can't rely on anyone else to motivate you or hold you accountable. It has to be internal. Period.
And he even suggests using negativity as fuel, like if someone calls you fat.
Yeah, he says turn it into brutal self-assessment. Instead of getting defensive or hurt, ask yourself honestly, am I fat? Okay, maybe they're right. And then use that harsh truth as rocket fuel to change. Don't let it crush you, let it ignite you.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this intense deep dive up. If we boil down all these sources, all these stories about Goggins, what's the absolute core message that endures?
I think it really comes back to those key pillars we've talked about. 1, deliberately callous your mind. Seek discomfort to build mental toughness.
Right. 2, understand the 40% rule. Recognize that your perceived limit is usually far short of your actual potential.
Exactly. 3, grasp that pain-pleasure dynamic. Real, lasting satisfaction often follows struggle. Pleasure follows pain.
4, attack your weaknesses. Don't avoid them, triple down on them.
Yeah.
That's where growth happens.
Yep. 5, find out who you really are through struggle and total accountability.
That's 6.
And 6, embrace radical self-reliance. Own your journey.
And the powerful thing is, he genuinely seems to believe this isn't about being born special. He thinks anyone can access this.
That's maybe his most crucial point. He constantly emphasizes where he came from. He calls himself a pathetic motherfucker back then. Overweight, insecure, failing, terrified.
If he could do it.
Then he believes anyone can at least explore what they're capable of. It's not about becoming Goggins, but about unlocking your own potential by being willing to face the darkness, fight those internal demons, and push past those self-imposed limits. It's about opening, as he says, the dark chambers in your own mind.
Okay, so let's bring this home for you, the listener. We've journeyed through Goggins' world of extreme endurance and mental fortitude, especially this idea that when you feel utterly spent, you might only be at 40% of your capacity.
Which naturally leads to a pretty provocative question for yourself. Where is your 40% line?
Yeah. Think about it. What challenges have you backed away from? What goals have you abandoned? What discomfort have you avoided because you thought, nope, that's it. I'm done. I can't.
Was that truly your limit, or was that just your brain's governor kicking in at 40%?
Maybe the real deep dive isn't just listening to us talk about Goggins. Maybe it's looking inside and asking yourself, what might be waiting in that other 60%? What potential could you unlock if you just decided to push a little bit further past that point of wanting to quit?
Definitely something to chew on. A powerful thought.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.